All right. Well, I wanted to introduce Beatrice and Starlet. So I'm Jasmine, and I've recently been talking a lot to both Starlet and Beatrice, and we want to give a bit of background into what this GoFundMe is all about. So, hi, Starlet and Beatrice. I wish this was like significantly better circumstances, but I'm very glad to be sharing this space with you right now.
Likewise. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you taking just this measure to make everyone aware of what's happening.
Well, I think everyone should be aware of what's happening. And so we chatted before we started recording, and you said that you're comfortable talking about all of this. So that's what we're going to do now, just have a dialogue between the three of us about Ashley, who was your daughter, Starlet. And needless to say, I can't even begin to understand what you must be going through right now. So let's focus on justice and on getting the story out there, but our hearts are with you. So you contacted me after we met through an online workshop, and you told me something very jarring. Do you want to talk about what it is that you shared with me?
Sure. Like you mentioned, our initial contact was through a mutual workshop, a Zoom online, and you shared your contact information, and you also shared that you were, excuse me, a member of the LGBTQ community. And there was slight hesitation, but as I typically move throughout life, I move and then I apologize after the fact. So I reached out to you and just shared with you that I had recently lost my child, Ashley. And what I said to you was that, in essence, that Ashley had died. I wasn't sure what the circumstances were. I shared with you that Ashley was a member of the LGBTQ community, resided in Newark, New Jersey. And I found out that Ashley had died via Facebook. And I found out 9 days after the fact that my child had died. And when I found out, the circumstances were that we were all in lockdown. In April, it was April 9th, which was Ashley's birthday. And the family didn't have constant contact, but one thing that I did on an annual basis was I reached out via social media to my child, and I always tagged her in a post, right? So I would say happy birthday, and there was always a picture of the two, like this. Here's one of when she was 2 years old. So it was always something like this, and I would tag, I say happy birthday. And this particular post, it was, thanking God for preserving both of us. Clicked on Ashley's link to Ashley's Facebook, and I saw all these rest in peace. And so I mentioned that to you because that was the moment when I found out that my child was no longer here. I was working, I'm a travel nurse. I was in Vermont at the time, and I was literally standing at my medication cart, dispensing medication. You're not supposed to ever be on Facebook while at work, but that's what I was doing. And that's when I found out that my child had passed 9 days prior to that. And I also shared with you via email that all the information that I obtained, I got on my own. No one contacted me to let me know that my child was dead. Wow. 9 days later.
Wow.
And so I found out through Ashley's friends and social contacts via her social media, Facebook and Instagram, exactly what they knew, which wasn't a lot, but at least it started me on a path to reaching out to individuals, which eventually led me to Beatrice, you and Beatrice.
Right. Yes. And there were a lot of things that you learned around that time, including that that Ashley was a trans woman and identified as a woman, which is also something that you didn't know before her.
Correct. We, the family, referred to Ashley, and Ashley was my daughter. You have to forgive me. I'm not accustomed to saying daughter. I found out after Ashley's death that Ashley actually lived as a woman, because this is how I knew Ashley. This was Ashley at work. Ashley worked as a chef, a cook, right? So the family referred to Ashley as AJ because my ex-husband was Ashley, right? Mm-hmm. Still is. And so that's how we identified the both of them, Ashley Sr. and Ashley Jr. So this is all new language. This is all new for me. So I would like to ask people to just please be patient with me. It's never my intention to discredit anyone or diminish or take away anybody's right to live as they want to live. We just didn't know, and we just didn't have the information.
Right. Of course. That's so much to learn. That's so much to learn at once. And when you contacted me, I'm in Los Angeles, but I started to call around different places in New Jersey, where I'm from, and so I'm slightly familiar with it. And I found Beatrice and the Newark LGBTQ Center. And Beatrice, we got on the phone, and you were gobsmacked. You were shocked to learn about Ashley, because you thought for sure that at this point you would have known, you would have heard about it, because it had been a few months already since her death.
Right. So our first conversation occurred in June, which I guess was near the time that the two of you participated in the workshop. And we have been, the Newark LGBTQ Center here have been working with the Newark Police Department for almost 2 years now, because the Newark Police Department is under a consent decree with the Department of Justice. And one of the issues was how they treated the LGBTQ community. And so we've been working with them, a great group of police officers, let me say that, around training police officers. And, you know, their training curriculum wasn't nice. And so we came up with something much more appropriate, wonderful, culturally sensitive, et cetera. And so for me to find out that a Black trans woman, a young Black trans woman, had died on the streets of Newark, and no one knew about it, no one in the community knew about it, none of those police officers contacted us to let us know about it, was shocking to me. And I was like, in Newark? And you were like, I said, okay, I need to make a phone call. So the first contact that I made was with one of the officers who I've been working with, who I have a great amount of respect for, to tell him that, do you know that this Black transgender woman died outside the YMCA, 600 Broad Street, and no one knows about it. He didn't know about it, which was shocking to me. So you have a whole group of police officers whose job it is to be liaisons with the LGBTQ community, but there's this tragic death of this very young person who died alone with no family, and you did no reach out to us, no communications to us, nothing. And so I directed him to find out for me, you know, as much as he could. And he did immediately. It was 24 hours later, I think, maybe 2 days at the most, where he, you know, offered his apologies for the fact that, you know, there was no awareness of this. And then I explained to him the problems that the family has been having with getting straight answers from the Newark Police Department, trying to get the police report, trying to find out what happened, how much the family had to do with no help from any institution in Newark, no justice institution, no police, nothing, to find out what happened to their daughter. And so after a couple of days of having conversations with him, you know, and I also asked that he elevate this, because this is not something to be handled at the lower level. To me, it was such an outrage and such a level of disrespect shown not only to Ashley, but to Ashley's family and to the greater LGBT community, that I felt like somebody of a higher level should be the one that is contacting Starlet and you know, giving them some explanation of not only what happened, but what's being done to clarify the investigation, to give them a definitive answer. Starlet and I talked. She had no death certificate. She had no coroner's report. She was told that it would be 16 to 20 weeks from April 1st before she would even get a coroner's report or a death certificate. In the meantime, from the information I got from Starlet, you know, all of Ashley's belongings were left in the room that she was renting at the Y. They didn't even go and get her cell phones to attempt to find her family, because I'm sure those cell phones would have led to her brother Elijah, right? His name's Elijah, right?
Correct.
Or you.
Yes.
Left the cell phone, 2 cell phones behind, didn't collect any of her stuff, just left everything there and just did nothing. And so from April to June, really nothing happened.
Right.
It wasn't until I made the phone call in June that they even pulled the traffic cameras. There's a camera right at the corner. And when I talked to Starlet, I said, there's a traffic camera right there. There has to be film.
And nobody had even bothered to do any investigation. So let's pause for just a second, because at this point, how was Ashley's body found, and what had you been told at that point, Starlet?
So let me just say that I did receive a police report maybe 6 days ago.
From now, since we're recording, we're recording this on August 6th.
On August 6th, correct. So prior to that, it was just conjecture. It was a lot of the police, the detective that I spoke with that was assigned my daughter's case, telling me what they thought had happened and what they think happened. It wasn't based on any of the facts that is actually stated in the police report, because what they were saying was actually contradictory to what's in the actual police report. So they were telling me that they think that Ashley's injuries sustained to Ashley was a result of falling from a great distance. That is not in the police report. That's actually contrary to the witness statement in the police report, which states that they interviewed someone at the YMCA and that person saw Ashley running downstairs, not upstairs where the attic would be, which would be the only place for a person to take their life. So the police was kind of leading us and the family in one direction. But again, like when I said, when I got the report read something entirely different than what they were saying to me over the phone.
Yeah, it actually said that the doctor at the hospital thought it might have been a car accident.
Yes.
Right. That was the first thing you had told me as well, Starlet, that,
yes.
that you thought that she had been hit by a car.
Right, because that's what initially was told to me, but the story kept changing. First,
the story kept changing, but there was no investigation.
There was no investigation, correct, and no evidence.
Okay.
Just again, opinions and conjecture.
And a lot of inconvenienced people who were like running around in circles once Beatrice contacted them. And so let's go back to the camera. So Beatrice, you told them that there was a camera. And
yes, I said, Lieutenant, there's a camera right on the corner. There has to be film. Sure enough, within a day, they pulled the camera, the film from the camera, and ruled out that it could have been a car accident, because there was no traffic, no vehicle. And so now, well, what happened? Well, we think, but there's been 3 months have gone by with no follow-up investigation. No evidence collected, nothing, no cameras from the Y, nothing. The YMCA has cameras. There are 3 traffic cameras. The traffic report even says something about body cameras from the officers. So there was no review of the film at all until June.
Wow. And the film, what's it the film show?
The film panned across the area. There was no body. And then when it panned back, The body was on the sidewalk. So they did not see a vehicle. They didn't see a fall, and they just saw a body on the ground in the film. So that ruled out the traffic accident, but it doesn't explain how Ashley died.
Were there any other results that came from like the coroner or anything else?
I've received no coroner's report. I've received, and Ashley has been subsequently cremated. So any evidence that wasn't obtained prior to that has been obviously destroyed. So I can only go by what's in the police report that I have. And the police report is very telling to me and drew just a lot of suspicion just based on the description of how my child's body was found. It is not being just going into my nursing assessment and what I know when I'm looking at a patient. The description that's in that police report is not of someone who, number one, fell or was hit by a vehicle. It paints a picture of someone that was held down, tied down, and possibly strangled. That's me. That's not saying, that's me reading what I'm reading off of the police report.
That's you as a healthcare professional understanding how these things work, because you're reading things that show what, where they're strangled. It
actually stated that there were ligature marks on Ashley's legs and that Ashley's neck was grossly, grotesquely disfigured and swollen.
Okay.
No head lacerations, no opening to the legs. I'm sorry, to the head, which if we go back to, like I said, what was said by the police report, falling from a great height, the sclera, the white parts of the eyes were clear. There was no redness other than the redness that would occur from a strangulation as opposed to a sudden impact. There are two different sets of what will be visually obvious as sustained by those injuries, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and so that's truly horrific. Like that's hard to wrap my head around. But someone needs to be wrapping their head around this. So how do we find the answers and what happens now? Beatrice, can you give me any insight at all into like how a case like this should be handled?
By the police department?
Yeah, by the police department, because it seems like there was like gross negligence here on the part of the police department.
Yeah, and I think part of this is because of the fact that Ashley is a Black trans woman whose lives are not seen as valuable or worth the attention that someone else's life may be worth. And I think the probably attitude to me, the institutional attitude, was that, well, just another dead Black kid on the street, probably doesn't have a family that cares about them, whatever. And we're just going to, and I understand COVID was going on, it was April, right after the whole city got locked down and all of that stuff. But there was just a complete disregard for Ashley. No follow-up. I mean, you have a dead person who's 26 years old, young, on the street, and you just do nothing to follow up to find out who this person is, where's their family, who are their friends, the normal stuff. And then I know we all watch a lot of TV and, Law and Order and all that stuff. But I mean, myself as a, if I was investigating something, I'd be asking questions. I'd be trying to get facts. I'd be taking pictures and statements. I would collect her belongings. You would think that, you would take fingerprints or, to find out, was there someone else in the room with her? These questions come up. They come up to me as a layperson. So I would imagine as a professional police department and as a detective, that these are the same kinds of questions that should have come up for you. But they didn't. And so it was just mishandled completely. And to me, it continues to be mishandled because even after the discovery of they finally looked at the film, there hasn't been a lot of follow-up. I think Starlet, you've barely had you had one conversation with them since then, right? Just one.
Correct. Just one.
Just one.
Just one. And I just want to say that I reached out to the police. Still to this day, the initial contact was me calling them, letting them know who I was. No one ever called me to tell me that my child was dead. I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah,
so
that's, I mean,
my expectation that would be some investigation, that people would, be calling Starlet, that they would be trying to find her friends, that I would hear from someone at a higher level, one of the liaison people who's in the, who's the LGBTQ liaison team. Nothing I've had, it's been total silence.
Yeah, it was the ultimate in disregarding an entire individual and everyone in her family. And it was the ultimate proof that, I mean, can we have better proof that Black lives don't matter?
Right, exactly.
And
Exactly.
And she, I mean, every aspect down to her obituary, she was, she was misgendered in her obituary. And
she's misgendered on the police report.
Yeah. Wow, that's I didn't know that, but of course she was. So yeah. I think that a whole lot of people are invested in this just going away, and I think that where we are at right now is that it can't go away. It has to matter. She has to matter. The justice around this situation that currently doesn't exist, it needs to matter. And so where are we now? Let's talk about where we are now. Starlet, how you're doing, how your son is doing. And then I'd love to also just talk about Beatrice, like where things stand right now and what we need to do as a community to make sure that this is addressed. So Starlet, like I said at the beginning, I just don't even know how it must be to be you right now. How are you handling all of this?
The majority of my focus is honestly on finding answers. I haven't given myself an opportunity to sit long enough to be just really hot and angry. I am angry, but because I haven't been afforded the opportunity to just sit and grieve for my child, because there's constant moving that needs to be done. Again, when I found out, I was in a situation where I was even away from my youngest, Elijah. Hello, are you guys still there?
Yeah. Camera's frozen, but we can still hear you.
Still hear you, yeah.
Okay. So I honestly don't know how to answer that question. How am I? I'm furious. I'm angry. My child is gone. I'll never see her again. All the hopes and dreams that I had when Ashley was born haven't come to fruition, and they won't. Ashley's brother Elijah is in denial. He doesn't want to wrap his head around the fact. His recurrent statement is, AJ was just 26. I'm not dealing with this. I can't deal with this right now. So that's how Elijah's dealing with it, by denying it.
Yeah. And how old is Elijah?
Elijah is 20.
Okay.
Yes. So, and having a child die, and what I feel is at the hands of someone else until it's proven otherwise. There's just this unrest. I'm never at a state where I'm resting. I can't. I don't know if I ever will. And I find myself often in a place where I'm not able to talk about my child, because when you're a mother and your child is no longer here, it makes other people uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. Or they try to console you and they say things like, oh, well, they're in a better place. Or, you know, everything is supposed to work out the way it's supposed to work out. And, you know, that's not something I want to hear ever. So if anything else comes out of this, I really want people to learn how to communicate with parents who have lost a child. There are certain things that are appropriate to say, and there are certain things that are not appropriate to say. Telling me how you would have handled it is not an appropriate thing to say. Telling me that, you know, anything along the lines of how I should have been a better parent is 100% not an appropriate thing to say. Number one, you're not in my shoes. And I also want to say that if you are, unfortunately, a parent who has lost a child, you don't have a right to say, you know how I feel, because you don't know how I feel. You may have lost a child, but you don't know how I feel. And it's just important in having these conversations, I think, to just be mindful that it's not the burden of the parent who's lost their child to console you. That's not my job. So please don't put us in that situation. So moving forward, I just want answers. I want justice. I want everyone to know what happened to my child. And I want some closure. I don't have that.
Mm. Absolutely. And let's get you all of that. Beatrice, you run the Newark LGBTQ Center, as you've mentioned. Can we talk about what your center does and what resources you have that can help Starlet and bring justice to this case for Ashley, and what you need, how we can support you to bring justice to this woman who was killed?
Well, the primary reason why the Newark LGBTQ Community Center was started, we're 7 years old now, is because of the death of a Black young gay lesbian woman who was male identified, who was murdered on the streets of Newark on Broad Market. This street has had its incidences over the years when it comes to violence and LGBTQ people. Sakia Gunn was her name. She was killed, and a group of people got together and demanded that we have an LGBTQ center in Newark because gay people needed a safe space. They needed some place to go. They needed community. They needed to know that there was somewhere they were completely accepted and that they wouldn't have to be victimized or experience violence. And so we started the Newark LGBTQ Center. And we provide a safe space because safe spaces, that we believe, save lives. It gives people somewhere to go where they can be protected and also learn how to stay safe. Also share their stories so we know if the institutions that are supposed to be servicing them are servicing them with respect or they're being discriminated against. So we take on these cases, we advocate for people, we support families. Before COVID, when now the building is physically shut down, we had adult nights, we had game night, we had different social activities that would bring people in, and we did a lot of community work as well. We worked with the Newark Police Department, as I said. We did community forums, we got information out, and we tried to make people more aware and respectful and allied with the LGBTQ community, especially since most of the people we serve are people of color. And so when I got this call from Starlet, you know, I jumped into action into calling the network of LGBT community centers across the country. There's an organization called Centerlink. Centerlink is a collective of LGBTQ organizations. And from my conversations with them, they led me to several legal justice organizations that specifically are LGBTQ focused and Black trans focused. And through that connection, I was able to reach out to the National Black Justice Coalition, the Transgender Law Center, Lambda Legal, and a couple of other organizations. And thankfully, I heard from attorney Jasmine Rand, who was involved in the Trayvon Martin case. And she agreed, having heard the story and feeling as outraged as I felt, I think, to try to help this family. This family, you know, Starlet, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but, you know, you're going through what all families are going through. You know, losing your job, trying to, you know, pay the bills, trying to keep a roof over your head. And now you get hit with this huge tragedy. And you don't have the resources to get an attorney. You know, you don't have you're in Massachusetts. This happened in New Jersey. You can't travel. All of these things are at play in this particular case. And so, you know, the LGBT Center in Newark is predominantly a volunteer organization. Our resources are limited, especially during COVID, because our donations have gone down during that time because the economic effects are trickling down to nonprofit organizations and service providers. And so we did our best to try to find legal representation. We also wrote letters to the Director of Public Safety, the Chief of Police, the President and CEO of the YMCA, and the State Medical Examiner's Office, demanding that a thorough investigation of Ashley's death take place and take place now. We recognize, however, having an attorney is going to be incredibly helpful in moving this along. And so it's very important for us, and we've been doing this social justice work, and it's getting even more prevalent now because people are now starting to report these things. They're starting to speak up. They're starting to say something. They're starting to not accept being mistreated. And so they come to us for help, and we need a legal fund, a legal defense fund that will help us bring resources to these families and individual people so we can have them represented and so they can find justice and be treated fairly. And so some of this stuff can stop. And we need to elevate these issues, you know, to a national level because it's happening all over the country. And so what we need is for people to give us, from the goodness of their hearts, to donate to the center so we can continue to pursue Ashley's case. We have another case of a Saudi Arabian immigrant who fled his country. Political asylum was granted to him because he feared for his life as a queer gender person in his country. And so he came over to the United States seeking freedom. And what he got was housing discrimination. He got put out of his apartment by a landlord who did not like the fact that he dressed as a woman. And so now he's unemployed. He has no legal resources. Where's he going to go? And I know people will say, well, you know, there's ACLU and there's this group and there's that group. But there are so many of these cases that none of those organizations can take care of them all. And especially when it comes to resources to address people of color. You know, we're always the ones behind the 8 ball with less, trying to do more. And that's what we're doing now. And so I've been working tirelessly with Starlet, with Attorney Rand, and she's going to refer, we're going to use a local attorney in New Jersey, but they'll work together and getting this out, talking to people, trying to get the support that we need to make sure that we will see this case through till the end, until there is a thorough investigation, until the medical examiner responds with a death certificate, a coroner's report, till everything that Starlet and her family needs to heal. And I can't say you'll ever recover from this, but to get some sort of closure and healing, including help with your emotional, you know, state and the things that you're going through. So, you know, there should be counseling involved, victim support, and legal support. And those are the things that we need to be able to provide, not only to Starlet, but to other people, because this isn't just happening to Starlet. I hope it never happens again, but it's likely to happen again.
we need to bring a legal fund to the Newark LGBTQ Center.
Yes.
And we need that to happen now.
Yes,
And I think it's when people watch videos like this or hear conversations like this and it tugs at their heartstrings and they close the computer, or maybe they make a donation, which we do need. We need more than that too. We need everybody to be mobilized. And that means that you have to get creative about the ways that you're going to get active. Maybe it is taking the GoFundMe page or any articles that we hope come from this and sharing it with 50 reporters. If everybody watching this shared it with 50 reporters, then we can start something. It is making a donation and sharing that with your social media following. If you know anybody who is any kind of an influencer, it's making sure that this is in their hands. It is calling it is calling anybody who you know who's going to care, whether they are within the police department in Newark, or if they are your local policymakers, and contacting your local LGBTQ center and making sure they're aware of this. Start to tap into Facebook groups, start to tap into various virtual communities, but we're calling on you to help with this situation. And I hope that we can bring some justice here, because this is a truly heartbreaking, disgusting, and unfortunately all too common story. And like you said, Beatrice, it cannot happen again. And the only way that it's not going to is if we apply pressure, and if we take a multi-pronged approach to change making, and if we make sure that we are supporting Starlet and supporting the organizations such as yours, Beatrice, that are at the front lines of this work. So I'm setting up a GoFundMe page today. I hope it reaches, I think we're going to start with what I think we need for the retainer, for the legal fees, for both this case as well as other cases you work with at the Newark LGBTQ Center. And I hope that people get mobilized.
We have to hold our public institutions accountable, especially when a young life is lost. Any life is lost, really. But we know disproportionately that Black lives are seen in many ways as expendable. They're not important. They're not elevated to the level that they should be. And the fact that there's been no reporting on this locally really disturbs me, because this should not be a secret. Everyone should know about this. Everyone should be behind getting justice for Ashley, supporting this family. And so that's what the Newark LGBT Center is working very hard to do. And I appreciate you, Jasmine, for all the efforts that you're making to help us do that.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you. I wish that everybody would get involved when they hear about injustice. And Starlet, do you have any final words for us about how else we can support you, what you need right now?
I just want to thank you, both you and Beatrice. Thank you for linking me with Beatrice. Initially when I reached out to you, I was just, and I still am, just so exhausted, just trying to spin all the different plates at once. And I would love to get the help, receive some therapy. Thankfully, I have, within the last 2 weeks, secured another job position as a nurse. So I'm waiting for my insurance to kick in so that I can get therapy, because I need it. I feel like, it used to be called shell shock. Before it was called PTSD. And I feel like that is more indicative of what I feel. It's just a lot of shock and hurt. And I need help, and I need to gain that fluidity back, because it's important for me as a mother, a nurse, to be able to take that healing touch into the workplace, because I'm dealing with other people's family members, and they rely on me to be whole, healthy, and well in mind, body, and spirit. So that's where I would need the most help in getting that, that emotional, that psychological support for both me and Elijah, because like I said, he's in total denial. And I don't know what the space and the time will be when he decides to let that into his tissues on a visceral level, and how that's going to play out. Yeah. And so I need to be hold for him to catch him if he falls. So thank you again.
And we want to be there to be a safety net for you and your family.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I think we're going to make this happen. There's no other way.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.